Welcome to the PANSA PANSA Forum. In the Yoruba language, the word pansa is usually injected into poetry to express an uncomfortable, uncensored, and inconvenient truth. The PANSA PANSA Forum is candid conversations about the life of African immigrants in America as it relates to their adaptation to their new home. While some may find it easy to integrate and can balance between retaining the original African culture while accepting the culture of their new home, many continue to struggle to find a balance between both worlds.
Hello and welcome to PANSA PANSA Live. This is a podcast where we discuss the lives of African immigrants and their assimilation into Western society as they raise younger generations in a country that is quite different from their own. We also explore the experiences of children of immigrants as they balance the African and Western cultures. We present to you this informative, interesting, and expansive dialogue about the intricate experiences of African immigrants in America.
Welcome to Pansa Pansa. I'm your host, Kemi Seriki, and today I am having conversation with Oludara Adeeyo. Oludara is a returning guest on this platform. She has been on Pansa Pansa twice in 2021 before her first book, Self-Care for Black Women, was published. And then Oludara also was a guest when her second book was also published called Affirmation for Black Women. And today we are discussing parenting style within Nigerian household and parenting style within African immigrant household in the diaspora. Just to give a little bit of background about my guest bio, Oludara is a psychotherapist based in Los Angeles. She works as a psychiatric social worker where she assists individuals experiencing homelessness, severe or persistent mental illness. She's very passionate about helping people improve their overall well-being, especially Black women. Before becoming a clinical social worker, Oludara spent 7+ years working as a writer and an editor, and she was an associate web editor at Cosmopolitan and the managing director at XXL. So welcome to Pansa Pansa, Oludara Adeeyo. I'm so delighted to have you on this platform to discuss this complex intersection of cultural norms, parenting style, within African immigrant household. Our conversation will explore emotional expression, often shaped by deeply rooted cultural tradition and individual personalities, I will also say, which can result in patterns of enmeshment, I hope I'm calling it right, and control, and even generational trauma. So would you like to also introduce yourself further if I miss anything, or would you like to give the audience and the listener the background of how this discussion came to be, which came from your shared on Instagram? So
yeah. Well, thank you for having me again. Since we last met, my life has changed a bit. I no longer work with individuals who are experiencing homelessness. Now I work for myself in private practice, where I primarily treat Black women and other people of color. So I guess this discussion kind of came about when there was an episode of Fiance, or there was a show on OWN, Family or Fiance, I think that's what it's called. And there was an African-American girl who was marrying a Nigerian boy, and they were at dinner, and there was an incident where the fiance was bringing up that her mother-in-law or future mother-in-law had come over on Valentine's Day and had, I guess, requested that she take her plate and put it away. And I think she wanted to address kind of like how she may have felt dismissed or how she didn't think it was appropriate. Maybe I think it was much more than just the plate. I think it was that the mother came over for Valentine's Day, when that's usually a couple day and whatnot. And so what happened was, once she just kind of brought it up, the mother basically just blew off the handle. It was like, you will respect me, like in Nigerian culture, you're supposed to respect me. And, she had to be escorted out, and started saying to her son, like, don't be a wimp for a woman or something like that, and she had to be calmed down by I think maybe was her brother or family friend, I'm not sure. But yeah, and so that went very viral and sparked a lot of conversation. A lot of people were talking about how, at least on the internet, how this is something people experience in their Nigerian households. Some people were like, I've never experienced that, in which that's wonderful. But I think it opened the door for the conversation about how a lot of African or Nigerian households, there is a type of parenting that can be very disrespectful to the child. It can be very demeaning. And also the culture of Nigeria, the Nigerian like family culture, it like requires a bit of what I was calling enmeshment. And I think I had seen enmeshment in the household, at least with this TV show, because the mother was a single mother and she came to the US. She's made a successful life for herself. And so her son, in one part of that TV show, when he was having the conversation with her before the dinner where she blew up, he was like, I know that I'm your son, your father, your husband. It was kind of making it a joke, right? But it's like how many children have been in households, specifically Nigerian households, where the parents have made them feel like that, where the parents have made them feel like you're not just this child, you're this, you're all these other roles. And that's where the term enmeshment comes in. It's when the roles have been blurred and the roles are almost kind of reversed, and the child is now responsible for just adult things. It's like, who's the parent, who's the child in this relationship. And then when there's enmeshment, and let's say the child is now assuming all these roles that are parent like, and if the parent all of a sudden feels disrespected, now it's, I'm your parent, you're supposed to respect me. But the child is like, well, you've given me all these responsibilities, and so now all of a sudden I'm not the parent, I'm not the person in charge. So it can be very confusing and create really toxic dynamics and create poor relationships. It can also create like harm for a child, in the sense that they may not be able to have good relationships because they may not understand how to have good boundaries, how to assert themselves, how to express themselves in a healthy way. And yeah.
Yeah, that's so true, some of the stuff you said. And that I watched a clip of that video because I don't even know that kind of show existed.
Yeah.
The outburst that I saw this woman express to me is much more of a personality, because you could be in another environment among Nigerian household or even elders, especially knowing that this woman that her son is marrying, supposed to be her fiance, not a Nigerian, and she may not understand the culture. Even if she understands the culture, you first have to, bring that person in to let them feel comfortable, let them know that you are part of this family. Culturally, that's how it is, But sometimes the personality of an individual could actually be brought in, whereby they feel like, okay, maybe when they marry their husband or something like that, the man's father, they went through the same thing. And I understand what you're saying, because the mother-in-law power in Nigeria, it is so powerful. So a lot of time is very toxic, and you could be in another kind of household that is completely different.
Yeah. You're right. Absolutely. Yeah. No two households are the same. We may see some commonality, like some common experiences, but I agree. I don't think that with this mother, I don't think it's not as common, but I think it's common. Well, no, I think how do I want to say this? I don't want to say this is every Nigerian household, right? Like it's not. It's just not. But it is an experience that some Nigerians can relate to. Some children of Nigerian parents can relate to. And I will even go as far as to say not just Nigerian, African immigrant households. When I talk to other friends who are not of Nigerian descent, maybe of a different Black immigrant descent, they can share that I've experienced things in my household where my mother or father, whoever is the caregiver, just, has an outburst based on what they may have perceived as disrespect for culture. But I agree with you. Like in this incident, I think the African American woman didn't really know. And I think when you're bringing someone into culture, you do have to be graceful. You have to let them know things. You can't just assume that they're going to know things or that their partner will tell them things. Because sometimes when we grow up in cultures, it's like we learn these things instinctually. Like we just learn these things by being around people. We learn that, some parents need to be kneel to. Like, so we learn these things by just being in the community. And sometimes people forget that and don't teach that to other people. Yeah. So
that's so true what you say, and it's in a different part of Africa. Such behavior sometimes may be normalized, even though it's not part of the culture.
Yes.
And then people are not actually addressing it to actually say, well, I don't think that's necessary. She might be, and sometimes, you might be among the midst of people who will actually put you in your place and say, they might not put you in your place in front of that younger person, but they could call that person aside as an elder and said, that's not the right way to conduct yourself. You need to calm yourself down. The anger, you have to understand the issue of how anger could be destructive and actually destroy things, So to me, and like I said, I understand what you're saying, because there's a big difference between each society have its own cultural baggage, In Nigeria,
like that cultural baggage.
In Nigeria, some things that they could be done in Nigeria and is widely accepted. If you do it in another foreign country, they're looking at it from the Western view or European view. But back in Nigeria, it could be fine. And the same thing if you do certain things in the Western culture, an average an African person may look at it that, is that even okay? I don't know whether you saw this other video on social media.
Which one?
A white mother with her son sitting on the side and an African woman sitting on the other side of the bus. And this child was throwing tantrum. And she looked behind her. She said, if I put you under my nose, if you don't keep your mouth shut, if I put you under my nose, don't let me handle you. And that child became so quiet. And the mother was amazed that everybody was making, say, yes, that's African parents for you. You understand what I'm saying? So we have to actually look at that. But as a therapist, I want to bring this in terms of giving definition of things. Can you define the role of cultural norms and how in shaping the use of emotional outbursts as a means to control in Nigeria or within African immigrant family homes?
Yeah. Anger, emotions, and especially anger is definitely one that is used to control environments. And really, anger is external emotion, and usually there's something below it. And for a lot of people, that's never really revealed what it is. But usually below anger, there's things like sadness, neglect, feeling disrespected, feeling less than, sad, whatever. And oftentimes we just see the anger. And in a household where someone's emotion, and I will say it doesn't have to be anger. Some people can use their happiness as a way to manipulate as well, but that's if they tend to go between emotions, right? But like using anger as a way to control is abusive. It is abusive because you are training or you're traumatizing the people around you to, one, just kind of conform to however your emotions are showing up. So a lot of people are being hypervigilant. That's the word I'm looking for. They're being hypervigilant, meaning that means like you're constantly aware of how someone else is feeling. So if someone comes home angry, or if dad comes home and is like huffing and puffing, you already know what may happen in the household, what's going to happen if an argument is going to happen. And, and when things are very fiery in a household and someone's anger is controlling the environment, it dysregulates our nervous systems. And when our nervous systems are dysregulated, we have a hard time doing things like focusing and being happy and feeling good about ourselves and being able to function in a normal way. So it's definitely a form of control when a parent uses their anger. And I want to be respectful when I say this, but I've seen it a lot in like Nigerian households where like, I'll even say a lot of Black immigrant households where like the parents' emotion is used as a way to manipulate the child, whether it's like manipulating them into going to a certain career or certain decisions about their sexuality or certain decisions about where they want to live or, how they want to, other things they want to do in their life. You're often using the anger as a way to guilt a child into doing something that will make the parent happy. And I think that as a parent, your goal is to want your child to live their best life, not necessarily a life that only benefits you or makes you feel good or look good. You want your child to kind of just be their full selves. And I think in a lot of households, African households, there isn't room for that. And I think that's birthed out of fear, anxiety, right? Especially since we're talking about immigrants, like, it's a very big thing to come to another country and build another life and having to navigate without direction, right? And so it can build a lot of fear because I think immigrant parents have experienced a lot. It's begin to build a lot of fear, and you're in this world. You got a child who's in another country, and they're growing up in this culture that you may not be too familiar with, and that can also create some insecurity. And so you're trying to remain control of the household and control of the culture because you want to preserve the culture. Because, like I said earlier, sometimes with culture, when you're growing up around it in your community, you don't have to do things like, let's sit down and talk about why we do XYZ in our culture. It kind of just happens and we just learn.
Yeah, that's so true. What you just said, because we have to immigrant, apart from Africa, people of color, seen even among the Caucasian who comes from different European countries, whereby the culture is different. And it's not like when you come in, they have to put you in a school and say, this is how you have to raise these children. So you only do what you know. And also surrounding the fear that you might have around you of what you see every day. Every day you see police arresting people, or every day you see so many unfortunate things happen. And the best thing you think you could do is to hold your child so close to you and, let them know, in order for you to be safe, which is mentioned anxiety. Anxiety also contributes to all those decisions.
Yeah.
It's so right. Because you don't know what could come. Let me give you an example. In Nigeria, if they said somebody got arrested, it is the worst thing anybody could tell any parent.
Really?
Because it's, before you could be arrested for something in Nigeria, it's not for trespassing. It's not for, let me say, even, shoplifting. They might slap you here and there and say, go about your business. But when it involves going to court, it is something big for an African immigrant. Because back home, we don't go to court for any minor things like that.
Right.
Because many of the issue is solved within the community.
Yeah.
So it takes away a lot of all these other things that is happening in the West. It takes a lot of all those things out of the table for us to worry about. And then you also have to look at, some of the parents may not have their papers. They may not have documentation, whereby even not, going to court. What am I going to do in court? I just retired because I work from my job, whereby, thank you, I work in the courthouse. And I had a Nigerian, about 2 or 3 times I had my Nigerian fellow coming to see me at the job. And they came in, they cannot believe how many people are in the courthouse. It was a culture shock for them. That why are these people in the court? So many people. They look at the line before they come in, people checking in. It was so, eye-opening for them, to the extent they came to my office and we talked about that for like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And they asked me, what are these people doing here? I said, you only see family court. You need to go to criminal court on the other side.
Everything.
Also see what is going on there. So we have to actually look at that and see where the anxiety for immigrants is coming in. And I'm so happy that we're talking about this today.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. It's like, it is a culture shock. And, when I think about like my parents growing up, and now that I'm an adult and I can look back, I can see like, there was a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of anxiety in, trying to push me to become a doctor or a lawyer, which if you ask any immigrant child, my parents told me it was either a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. And I don't want to do either of those. And you can see why, though. It's your parents want you to experience stability, right? Because I think it's very unstable when you come as an immigrant. And, if you don't come here with a ton of money, but even like if you come here and let's say your status as a person, as a citizen, it's not easy to get citizenship here, right? The pathway to citizenship is so rocky. It can be so difficult. And it's almost like if you didn't come in the 80s, like it doesn't even, it's so hard. And that can be destabilizing, right? Not knowing, okay, well, can I stay in the US? And, when I think about, I have tons of family who came in the US, stayed for a little bit, but then had to, moved to Canada because whatever, they couldn't get through the court system, right? Like for whatever reason, they've been paying and doing everything they need to do forever, whatever reason, their time has run out on their citizenship or whatever status they've been given, and they have to leave the country, And so, especially in the US, we talk about the US, it's like it's really hard to navigate life here as an immigrant, and it's something to be commended. Yeah, and also it's hard when you're a child of an immigrant because it's like you recognize that, but you're also growing up in this culture, and so you're experiencing freedom. Like, so I don't have the anxiety of like, oh, I need to become a doctor and lawyer because I'm like, I grew up in this place where I feel like anything is possible, but it can be hard because parents may not see that, immigrant parents may not see that and understand that. So
yeah, and it's not only, I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts when you listen to people from Asian countries, it's the same thing. I actually read 2 books from children of Asian immigrants, and it's part of their issue too, of their parents pushing them. They have to go into this profession, doctors, scientists, coding, engineering. Those are the things that they push for. So it's part of the experience. And when you look online, Google African children who are talking about African parents. It is so much online. I just want us to talk about it more and then try to educate and finding solutions. So as a therapist, what would you consider alternative communications strategy that might foster healthier emotional expression from the parents?
Yeah, I would encourage a parent to, obviously, I would say get in some type of therapy, but really like learn emotional regulation, whatever that looks like for them. Learning how to de-escalate maybe the feelings inside of them that are arising from the anxiety, from the anger, sadness, etc., and try not to project it onto their children so they can have like good conversations and be able to just understand their children more rather than just projecting their views. And I understand that most parents just really care for their kids and they want the best for them, and they don't necessarily mean to project their fears onto them, but be aware of the fears, be aware of it and try to have a more understanding relationship with your children and to listen to them more. And I think, and also for children of immigrants, I would encourage them to really go on their own personal journey of like getting to know themselves, because sometimes when you grow up in immigrant households, you feel like you need to please your parents in order to be loved, to be successful, etc. So go on a journey of like figuring out what you want to do, what brings you joy, how you want to spend your life. And, that can be done obviously through therapy, through just trying new things that you want to do, through building community with others who have similar interests like you. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so true because when you look at it, children also learn from their parents in the way they express their emotion. And a lot of times, some parents may not, see that those children are also learning, and it might be part of how they understand. Maybe this is the way to communicate.
Right.
In American society, it's completely different when they have to work in corporate America, when they have to be there. It might be something that could also create other issues for those children.
No. You're right. You're right. We do learn a lot from our parents, whether consciously or subconsciously. And sometimes we don't realize what we've learned from our parents until we're much older. And then we have to unlearn those things because some of the things we may learn are unhealthy, not being able to regulate our emotions and having outbursts and being angry. And it's important to kind of unlearn maybe some of the things you've learned from your family that might have not been healthy.
Yeah, and if they're aware of it anyway.
Yeah. Right. No, that's very true, because I can think of family members who I'm like, you're just like your parent, but you don't see it in the way you respond, and that's if they want to be aware of it. Right. That's like the first step, being aware that, okay, I have poor communication habits because of my relationship with my parents. And oftentimes an outside party can point that out, but you have to be willing to accept that.
And you mentioned something that I wanted to point out, which is so important, because within African immigrant households, and they may not even be aware that what they may be doing is damaging, whereby they praise a child that is doing everything right in the way they see things. Look at what he's doing. Maybe he's in medical school or he's in law school and he came out, got a job, making them proud. And then the other children in the household is not up to that part.
Yeah.
And they give more attention to the one that actually they could say this is our pride and joy. And some of them have been in a conversation or even within a family whereby they say
Yeah, they
jokingly
do.
in front of look at your brother, look at your sister, look at what he or she is doing. Look where she is. Oh my God, that's my son who just walking. That's my daughter who just walking. Left out. Can you dive into how?
Yeah.
And they feel like if they do that, the other one will change.
Yeah. I laugh because this is was my household, right? I was I don't want to say golden child, but I've always been academically sound. Like I've always done school and I were good. I can get A's with my eyes closed. It's just how my brain works, right? I'm just really good with reading, writing, all these things. However, I have a sibling that's the opposite for them. And growing up, but they're older than me. And growing up, my parents used to tell me, they used to tell me, oh, you're the only one we can rely on. Like, you're going to do well in life. I'm sure for my sibling hearing that, that's very discouraging for them. And then also for me, it put a lot of pressure on me. So now I'm focused on I have to be successful and creating anxiety. It creates two different types of anxieties, or it's one where the self-worth is pulled from the productivity, it's pulled from the need to be successful, and the other party is not good enough. They have low self-worth of feeling like I can't compete all these things. I can't achieve all these things. If my parents don't think I can achieve these things, then why should I? Why should I even try? And so that builds up. That impacts both children differently, right? But you're right, it's something that the parents do in front of the child that I don't really understand why. Maybe they're thinking that's how they can encourage the children, but honestly, I think it does the opposite. It creates unhealthy dynamics within children.
Even the one that is their golden star too may actually wants to continue to prove him or herself.
Yes.
And it could lead to other emotional issue. It could lead to mental health challenges. It could lead to, maybe addiction also. I feel like, okay, in order to continue to prove myself to my parents, I have to do all this other stuff, even though I don't have what it takes to do it.
Yes, exactly. Pushing yourself beyond your limits and then grabbing what you can to help you achieve these. And you're right. I've definitely seen it in elder daughters. That's a thing. The eldest daughter is often the family manager, therapist, third parent. They feel the pressure to be successful, and that can lead to taking other steps that aren't necessarily healthy. And that's because, a lot of the self-worth and self-confidence is coming from what you're achieving. And it's like, if I don't achieve these things, then I'm nothing. And that's a horrible narrative as a child to begin to have. It's really bad. And a lot of us have a lot of unlearning to do. And a lot of our self-narratives come from our parents. So if our parents are telling us these things, that this is how you get love in this world, right? And that can transfer into relationships, right? Like you can think oh, if I don't achieve this A+ on this test, my parents not going to love me. So now it can transfer into your other relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, where you're like, okay, if I don't achieve this great thing, this person's not going to love me anymore. Now you're constantly searching for ways to get their approval, and it can be very, very detrimental.
And the first daughter achievement that you talk about is back in Nigeria is even worse than that. And because it doesn't have to be in academics, it has to do with household chores.
Wow, yes.
Okay,
yes.
whereby you are the first daughter or you are the only female in the house. You will be the one responsible for everything in terms of cooking, cleaning, taking care of your siblings. So you become like the second mom. Even if you protested, they said they training you so that when you become older, you become the type we attract a good husband. You'll be able to manage your family household.
Yes.
Even in Nigeria, it's now that people are pushing back, women are pushing back. A woman could have a PhD, but if she doesn't have a ring on her finger, they consider it to be nothing.
Nothing. I think about my work, a lot of my books and content and all these things. I feel like that is something I think about a lot. And that is at the center of it. My mom was an eldest daughter when I think about it. And I'm the eldest daughter by role, but not by birth order, right? And because I'm the only daughter in the family. And so it's just so patriarchal, right? I think Nigerian culture is so very patriarchal. And it's really setting up women for unsuccessful relationships, unsuccessful alignment in their life, in that they don't feel like, okay, well, if I don't get a husband, then my life means nothing. Or it doesn't matter what I succeed, it doesn't matter what work I get to achieve and, what PhD I get or whatever. As long as I get a husband, that's all that matters. And I think the culture, especially in Nigeria, definitely perpetuates it, like you said. I've heard stories of my friends who are Nigerian and when they go back to visit Nigeria and they're staying at their aunt and uncle's house, and their aunt works all day, and so does the uncle, but the uncle won't eat until the aunt gets home because the aunt's got to make the food. And it's just like, what are we doing here? It's a different time now where women are working and have all these responsibilities. It's not just on us to upkeep the households. It's so damaging. I'll be honest, it's something that I'm also working through. I'm in a stage of like, I don't want to care for anyone but myself, And it also leads to a lot of like women not wanting children because they've been like, I've been raising my family my whole life. Why do I want children? I'm tired. I want to take care of myself. And I don't blame those women for having those feelings.
And you're so right, because I could blame myself of the same thing. I have a son and a daughter. My daughter is the second one. So on Sunday morning, I usually wake up to do her hair. So after doing her hair, then I tell her, you want to join me in the kitchen so you could see what I'm doing, what I'm cooking and everything. And she tells me point blank and said, why is my brother not in the kitchen? And she was maybe around 7 years old at that time. She said, why is he sleeping? He's still sleeping. You could come to the kitchen. And I told her, I said, you could learn how to cook because you're going to have children. You learn to cook. And she told me, she said, maybe my husband will be able to do the cooking. I don't have to do the cooking. And I kept my mouth shut right there because he reflected back and said, okay, this is me actually putting my background of how I was raised. I'm trying to put it on her. Let me just step back. She will figure it out. And she joked later and she said, if I need to learn, there's YouTube that shows all this food that you want to cook. I could cook it at that time if I needed to. She's 26 now. This is somebody telling me this 20 years ago. Wow. And I said, okay, let me just leave it that way.
So that's incredible. I think that's incredible that I think it's incredible. And I want to commend you. And like, it's amazing that in that moment, 19 years ago, you were able to be like, okay, you know what? This is not about me. You're right. Let me correct this behavior. Let me not pass on this like patriarchal, very demeaning view of family and, roles in the household onto you, and, let you do what you want to do. And I think that's incredible because a lot of parents be like, no, like they'd be very like demanding, and that would create resentment and animosity in the child. Now, child is like, I don't even want to learn to cook anymore because you're forcing me to do this. And no one likes to be forced to do anything. So, but yeah, why is it only women who have to learn to cook? Men need to learn to cook as well. When my mom got ill, she couldn't cook anymore. My dad had to cook. And thankfully he had older sisters who taught him how to cook, and he also had lived a life where he had roommates, and roommates taught him how to cook and all these things. But everyone needs to learn how to cook, right? It's not just women. We all need to survive in this world.
And you guys with this generation, you could actually order for your own food and then you let them cook it for you for a week.
Yes, it's a totally different time.
It's different. So I want to bring you to respect for elders versus personal boundary. So we dive into the cultural mandate that, we respect for the elders, and that might conflict with the child's need for self-expression. Can you expand more on that as a psychologist?
Yeah. Well, as a psychotherapist, I'm not a psychologist.
Consider a scenario where respect expected might cross into authoritarian and suppress the child.
Yes. I think what you were sharing earlier with your daughter, that's a great example of like how that could have crossed into you need to respect your elders versus self-expression. Your daughter was able to fully express her discomfort with maybe what you were asking her to do. And it could have gone the other way, where you could have been like, well, I'm your mother, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that. But I do understand respecting elders. I think all cultures have like respect for elders, because there's like a respect for someone who's been here longer and lived longer and done things and upholded some traditions that are necessary. But also times change, and sometimes the older you are, the harder you have with like the times being different. And sometimes you can hold on to these traditions because it's what it's what makes you feel safe. But the reality is that life is always evolving. The internet wasn't here, like 30 years ago, like 30, 40 years ago. It wasn't here. So it's just a different time. And we have to allow the children to express themselves, because that's how they get to know who they are. That's how they can survive in this world after the parents are gone too, because they are able to express, learn, and like really just move through the world with how they feel and how they align with themselves. Yeah, respect for elders is important. However, it is also important for a child to have self-expression. So there needs to be a balance, and understanding, especially for the elder, to understand, okay, am I trying to uphold something that doesn't apply anymore? Or am I trying to just teach my child something that is essential for their life? So, and also a bit of ego, right? You have to let go of ego a bit. I can think in my life, I have a father who's very tradition, this, tradition, that, but I grew up most part in the United States. So, for a lot of immigrants, like your parents are the main connection to your culture, unless you're in a community with the same people. But I wasn't taught a lot of things about our culture. I had to learn that on my own, or through interacting with other family members whenever we did. So my dad used to always, I mean, he still does. He's very much so like, you have to respect me, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes it can feel like disrespect when a child is just expressing themselves, but that's usually not what's going on. They're just trying to share their experience with the culture and how they feel about it. And oftentimes, I think a lot of parents may feel like you expressing this is like you talking back and disrespecting the culture, because they never got to, right? They just had to, this is the culture, we deal with it, this is how things go. And oftentimes, they want to pass down that same view to the child, and the child is like, no, different time, different way we do things. And that can be hard. That can be hard.
It's very difficult. It's really, really difficult because, like I said, there's a lot of cultural conflict that comes in. That I remember watching something on YouTube, and this happened in Nigeria, where the elders are sitting on one corner and the younger generation are sitting on the other corner, and they're talking to each other. And this younger guy was saying, as a young person in Nigeria, I cannot even express myself. And this woman was telling me, yeah, but you have to be respectful. You have to be respectful, even if you want to express yourself.
Yeah.
But the person who may be expressing themselves in anger is because of frustration that they are feeling, or the lack of being able to open up on many occasions to actually break down different things that they're experiencing at different times. Parents too, as an immigrant, also go through so much issue, and they go through so much trying to navigate this society, even working in an environment where you constantly being looked down on, taken as if you are nothing, and trying to make ends meet, to pay rent and all this other stuff. So a lot of time, we as parents, we don't tell our children some of the challenges that we are going through. I've heard many people, many of our children, even mine, ask me, oh, you don't talk about what you might be feeling and everything. And I said, if I have to tell you, I don't want to create another anxiety in you, because then that child may be getting worried that this is what their parents is going through. So in many cases, they tend to keep it in or talk to their age mates.
Yeah, which is appropriate. That's actually very appropriate for a parent to talk about their issues with someone of their age, versus sharing it with their child. Oftentimes that doesn't happen in immigrant households still sometimes. And it's very important. And that's how you prevent enmeshment, like we were talking about. However, it is important to express what you're going through, simply because you're not holding on to it. And I think a lot of Nigerian, African immigrant cultures, they thrive on silence, of people being quiet about what they're going through. And I think this is because of colonization. A lot of us come from countries that were colonized, and we had to be quiet. We had to fit in. We had to assimilate. our ancestors had to assimilate. And so oftentimes that's passed down in the way we parent, it's in a way our families are formed to as a way to protect everyone from harm, but it does more harm than good, I think.
Yeah, it does. And to me, even if you look at the Asian culture too, they are much more on a quiet side whereby they may not express themselves. Because for me, I read broadly, in terms of, not only limiting my education regarding immigrant experience to only the Africans, also other culture, other community as well. Because if you look at the Asian culture, it's also the same. Even apart from colonization, in terms of even some expression among the Yorubas, maybe through proverbs, whereby, okay, if elders are talking, in order for a younger person to break into that conversation, you have to ask for permission through proverb. Yeah. And then, you express yourself. So it's cultural. I know we experience colonization, but we have to look at other aspects of how culture also contributes to some of these things as well. So can you give advice how families can negotiate cultural expectations to ensure that respect does not become a barrier to open communication? I've been around many Nigerians, even African immigrant children. A part of what pushed me to this area is, having to build the intergenerational relationship. And as I come around African immigrant children, they're able to talk to me openly, apart from Nigerians, other African immigrant children. Learning from me, I'm learning from them, from dialogue back and forth. And it's because I'm more open, such dialogue. So, and I wish we can extend it broadly within our community, whereby younger generation, as long as you communicate with respect. So how can family negotiate that cultural expectation to ensure that respect does not become a barrier to open communication?
That's a very good question. And it really does require like the desire for understanding versus being right. I think oftentimes when elders are asking for respect, it's like their ego wants some attention, but also they want to be right. They want to uphold these traditions, but it's really important to be open to adapting to new environments. And so investigate, why do I feel like I need to be respected? Like, why do I feel like I need this respect in order to communicate with my child? And also consider, how is this need for respect harming my child? Right? Because we don't want to harm our children, but it's hard, and when you were sharing that, other immigrant children come to you and they talk to you because you're open, is because a lot of them come from families where the parents just aren't open. It's very judgmental, and judgment of self and others is a really hard thing to break down. I don't have a formula of how to break that down, but like, it's just like, I think a lot of the cultures, they brew judgment because people want to be right. People want to respect. But to break down that barrier of needing respect, it really requires maybe both parties having an understanding of like, okay, I want to understand, so coming to understand. And sometimes when you have an adult that wants to be respected, if you're the child, you may have to engage in some of those cultural antics that are seen as respect to break down the barrier and to be able to express yourself, and also some acceptance. Like, some people may just not change. I'm just never gonna talk to my father a certain way, right? Like, I'm just never going to be like, yo, dad, da da da, like, that's just never really gonna happen. And so I will always have to approach my dad in a certain respectful manner. But in order to get to being heard, I have to maybe do some of those things of like, that just make the parent feel heard, the parent feel respected. So sometimes you do have to engage in those antics.
Yeah, that's true. I remember I was in a community discussion one time, and this guy is a medical doctor from Middle East, and he's also talked about this, whereby even though he said, I'm a doctor now, I'm not free to talk to my parents anyhow. He said, when I go to and see them, he said, our communication, our conversation is like 2 or 3 sentences, and that is it.
That's
To the
it.
extent, even though he's a medical doctor, he said, I'm getting married now. I'm in my late 30s. I have to be in therapy so that I could have healthy relationship.
Yeah.
In my fiance, because I have to, actually break down many of those things that I grew up with.
Yeah. And that, I think through therapy, it also comes with like an acceptance of like, okay, this is the capacity of the relationship my parents can have with me, and I have to accept that and look for what I need in other relationships, and that's just true. And sometimes I think about when we talk about intergenerational trauma or patterns. Once I learned how my dad's dad, how my grandfather interacted with his children, I was like, oh, okay, this all makes sense, because my grandfather was a polygamist, had 4 wives, many children. So was he always with my dad every night, reading books and, putting him to bed and all that? Probably not. His sisters were, or maybe his mother, so and that's some deep work that some people may just never see. That's just may not see how that impacted, right? Like if I tell my dad, okay, also I see how you act now. Like it makes sense. Your dad wasn't really like there. What are you talking about? My dad was there. He provided for me. It's like, oh, okay. We have different definitions of what support looks like. So there has to be a certain level of just like acceptance, and I think also like I think culturally, a lot of immigrant cultures, all the elders are just respected, right? Like you ask for a blessing for this and that, and it's just part of the culture. And so some things you have to just accept.
And the culture never said, let me also bring certain points in. The culture never said never to respect the younger generation.
Yeah.
There's a Yoruba saying that says an elderly person could reach the top of the tree to pick up a fruit, but he cannot dig his hand inside a small hole to pick up fruit inside. A small calabash, you're not going to break the calabash that has a small hole. So you need somebody with a small hand to go inside that calabash and pick up the fruit, meaning that a child also, presence is also very important. So is adults.
Yes.
So, and I want to also bring to the point that the sense of disrespect and free communication is not even about parents and children alone, or the age. It's also involving community organization. I don't know whether you've been to Nigeria community, whereby they are not paying each other, but they give each other title. This is executive, this is the president, this is the date, da. And when they talking, nobody else could say anything except those people who have the title.
Yeah, clinging to that as some form of like, I'm in power.
I'm very powerful. Look at the role that I'm, even though it's just a community organization.
Right.
That I remember being on my high school mates, whereby we're all in the diaspora, and they communicate with each other, they talk and all that stuff. Sometimes I look at what they posted and everything. So this guy is from England, and they posted that they're having an event in England, and those ones in America, one of them then answered, he said, what event are you having in England? Did you talk to the president in America to see if you can have that event? Oh my God, I just woke up, my head just went like this. I had to board in and say, who are you?
Right.
Who is this president? These are grown people. And you think this is all about, because your title is important.
Yeah.
You want to celebrate. So celebrate in England, you are in America, or whichever state you are. So they need to get a permission from somebody in America before they could hold an event in England. So that tells you the kind of society.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And to me, it's beyond culture.
Yes, I agree with you. It is beyond culture. Sometimes what is disguised as culture is just chaos and trauma and people creating their own rules of how things should be. And I think sometimes culture should be questioned sometimes. It's like, okay, why do we do this? Who is this harming? Should we continue to do this? And I think those things need to be inquired. But I'm curious, like for you, like how were you able to kind of dismantle that in your own household? Like how are you maybe not pass on some of these harmful ideologies to your children?
because I recognized that from a beginning. And when I came to this country, I didn't have my children until, how old is my son now? He's going to be 30. Yeah, until about 13 years later. That gave me the permission to, navigate through this environment alone. And I didn't come with any husband. To be locked down in that, setting, because people who come in and immediately they have children, immediately they are married, it's very difficult for them to navigate openly in the society first and see, to be able to differentiate, okay, what is this? What is that? How can I do this? How can I do that? I was telling my daughter, and I never told this story before. When I was doing my undergraduate and I took a psychology class, and I was in that class, it's as if that professor was talking to me from what he was saying about the role of gender identity and all this other stuff, to the extent I was talking about my experience growing up in Nigeria, the family dynamics. And that was the first time anybody ever listened to me.
Wow.
And I went into that time, Barnes and Nobles used to be so big in New York. And I could go into Barnes and Nobles in their psychology section and get lost in there.
Wow.
In their philosophy section, I just sit down there and I read. It's so amazing that somebody could be thinking differently from what I know. So many immigrants who come in here, they don't have that privilege because they came in. Even with me, I'm still working it. I'm still pushing.
Yeah.
And you have to define yourself and ask yourself, am I? What is healthy in this culture? What is not healthy?
Yes.
What do I want to follow? What is it that I don't want to follow?
Yeah.
I was looking, for example, the idea of certain things that is culturally done and it has a negative impact. I don't know whether you know about Ashwebi business.
Yes.
Whereby they go into party, everybody wear the same thing. Yeah. And I had to create my own way of thinking, my own value, that I'm not going to be part of this.
Oh, wow.
And I don't want to be part of this. When I made that decision, you will see people who challenge, why are you thinking this way? Aren't you from Lagos? Because they love to wear lace. And I said, I don't wear lace because it's not African traditional clothing.
Wow.
What about gold? You don't wear gold? I said, gold gives me bad luck. It actually destroys my spirit. So, and that's how I continue to carry myself, because I see that it's not healthy.
Wow. We call it generational change maker. And so you were very curious, you were very open. And I think I would say that's what a lot of people need to be. And if we're talking about parenting and children, I think that's what a lot of parents need to be. You need to be curious about the environment you're in. What is healthy? What is not healthy? What am I putting on for my own ego? What doesn't work for me? Oh yeah, I commend you. That's really it. Like, you really got to be curious and open.
Yeah.
Like you said, a lot of immigrant parents don't have that luxury. They're like, I just need to work and work.
Yeah.
Holding on to these traditions is what makes me feel safe. But if you can be open and curious and inclusive.
I know you talk about enmeshment and codependency and communal influence. We've talked about that, and you define what enmeshment means. So how do you think the cultural emphasis on community support impact a child's ability to develop healthy boundaries?
Well, there are a lot of unhealthy dynamics that can be created in community, whether it's like competing with each other, comparing with each other, also feeling the need to like assimilate and be the same and not develop individuality. That can be very detrimental, because now it's more focused on people pleasing. And in my work, I tend to I work with a lot of people to try to release them from people pleasing, because I think that's what contributes a lot to low self-esteem, inability to pursue your goals, and etc. Yeah, while community can also be helpful, because okay, we're preserving some cultures that are really great, but also it can create just unhealthy habits as well.
Yeah. And what are the strategy and intervention that you could find effective in helping families to break that cycle of emotional control and enmeshment?
Ooh, and that's a hard one, because usually if there is some enmeshment and control. There has to be one person who's in there who can recognize this is a negative dynamic and they have to be willing to break it. And that may include, that can start with building boundaries, such as, I guess, for a child, maybe not seeking the opinion of their parent about something, making decisions that doesn't even involve their parent. For a parent, it can be not sharing your opinion about every life decision your child makes. So,
and sometimes you just have to listen.
yeah.
Because I remember talking to someone before on this podcast, and she said her mother learned to ask her, do you want my advice or you just want me to listen?
That's great. That's a great way to start.
Yeah, that's, and I know we talk about adult responsibility, and what support system could you put in place to ensure that this responsibility in family does not become traumatic for a child?
Yeah, you got to let children be children, and the parent has to find support somehow, whether it's in community, family, extended family. And I will say, it can start with not having certain conversations with your children, just letting them be children and letting them just go through life, not, up until a certain point of not needing to feel the responsibility of like taking care of the household. So age appropriate responsibilities, right? Like, you're not going to ask a 5-year-old to take out the garbage at night, right? Yeah. You're going to ask a 5-year-old, hey, can you make sure you throw that away? Practicing having them throw something away. So it's about having age appropriate responsibilities for children, really evaluating if what is going on. Like, okay, am I providing my child with the right teachings, the right responsibility? Because you do have to learn responsibility, but sometimes parents give children responsibility that is out of their age range, and that could be too much.
And could you also expand on how the mental health challenges that you may have observed on children who are given adult responsibility early on? What?
Yeah. It can result in feeling responsible for everyone and everything. It can result in anxiety, depression, other mental health conditions that can make someone just feel like the world is on their shoulder, and just the inability to maybe feel motivated to do anything because they feel so pressured by life. Inability to enjoy things, and because they feel like they need to be responsible for everything and view life in such a serious manner. So yeah, I would definitely say one of the biggest mental health challenges of children who experience this kind of dynamic is depression, anxiety, and anything else that could follow.
Because even sometimes some of the adults could carry it over to their own profession too, whereby they grew up in an environment that tells them you are responsible for ABC and D. How does that have an impact in them?
It makes it hard to have relationships because you are also lacking boundaries, and boundaries are very important in relationships. And when you're not able to understand clear expectations and boundaries, it can really be detrimental to relationships. People may not want to be in friendships with you, romantic relationships with you. It can also result in unhealthy dynamics. Maybe you're in a relationship where now you've found someone who makes you be responsible for everything. Now you're in a dynamic with someone who makes you responsible for everything. And now you're not really in a partnership. You're basically in a relationship with someone you're taking care of, a child or something, like, but they're an adult. So it can make you seek out the wrong partners, the wrong type of friendships. And it's very important who you have around you in your life. Yeah.
Finally, I want to reflect on how generational trauma is transmitted through family dynamics and parenting style. If you can talk more about that, to consider the cycle of that trauma, including open dialogue, community education. Can you discuss more on generational trauma?
Yeah. So our relationships with our parents are our first relationships, and that's how we learn to move through the world. So if you have a parent who is very authoritarian, that can lead you to maybe also take on those same dynamics in the future. And then, so like if your parent was very authoritarian, then you could either become like that or you can become the total opposite. That could also be detrimental. And then you can also pass it down to the next child. If you haven't worked through the traumas of having a parent who was just had very high demandingness of you, and was requiring like strong obedience of you, where you weren't able to fully express yourself, and so now you demand that of the next generation, of your child, and so it just repeats itself. But if you unlearn those things and you learn yourself, you can understand where these things are coming from, and this way you don't pass that down to the next generation. And it's very important.
Is really something. So what role do community support or cultural sensitive therapy practice play in mitigating the negative effect of parenting style?
Yeah, I think cultural sensitive therapy and all these things mitigate it by one, helping people like accept that, one, you got to accept like, okay, I grew up in this environment. These are the things I've learned. Releasing self-judgment of how this may have shown up in your life. Also releasing judgment of maybe your parents and self and community, and finding a way to just like commit to being different if it's impacting you negatively. And I think it allows like a healthy balance of like acceptance and desire for change, and acceptance of what you can't change as well, because there are just going to be some things you can't change, and you have to figure out, okay, how do I navigate through this system that is not something I technically agree with. What boundary am I going to set? Am I going to engage with this sometimes, or am I gonna just completely cut it off? And I always encourage people, engage with the parts of your family that bring you joy. If talking to your parent every day of the week gives you stress, figure out a different boundary. Talk to them once a week, once a month. But if you truly enjoy bringing your acho, then do that whenever you can and you want to. But I think a lot of these therapies, it's about releasing like the pressure to perform and uphold these negative traditions.
Yeah. It is, and it's time to start breaking all this barrier down, because it could be traumatic for the younger generation, and we have to move on, and then shed away what doesn't work, because even culture is not written in stone.
Yep.
There's certain things that they put in place at that time because it was working at that time.
Yep.
Social structure at that time. That's
Yep.
why they put all those rules in. And when you look back and say, okay, it was working at that time, but it can't continue to work anymore this time because we're in a new era. It's just like telling a child that, oh, come and use rotary phone.
Right.
They don't know what they're talking about.
No.
Because, it's not part of what they are familiar with.
Yes, exactly.
So it's a different generation for different rules. So what would be your closing statements that you want to give to anybody listening to this podcast?
That's a good question. I would say practice self-compassion, and also practice compassion with your community as well. Give space for, like I've been saying, acceptance. I think radical acceptance is really helpful in just releasing any mental health pressures you may have and building boundaries.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Oludara Adeeyo. So Pansa Pansa continue to normalize conversation about the importance of issues such as parenting style and generational trauma within our community, in the diaspora, not only within America. So as I always say, as we continue to publicly discuss issues within our community, we're straightening away stigma associated with uncomfortable dialogue. And thank you so much, Oludara Adeeyo, for the knowledge you provided today to us about generational trauma and how it's transmitted through family, and the dynamics behind parenting style also. And I know those who will listen will benefit from this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Pansa Pansa Live Podcast. We hope to have you back with us in the next episode as we continue to explore the nuances of the African immigrant experience. If you'd like to connect with us, you can email us at talk@pansapansa.org. That is TALK at PANSA.org, and follow us on Instagram at pansa.pansaforum. Until next time, remember to spread kindness and love. Thank you and take care of yourselves.